Good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is session 6 of the 2024 Fertile course. Let's just mute everybody. Okay. And this is the last session, so prepare for Christmas. This evening, we're not going to spend a lot of time on talking as a big group. Most of this evening is about you guys practicing. So what I'm going to talk about mostly is the exam for those who want to do it. The practice, though, will be useful for everybody, even if you don't want to do the exam. So hang around for the practice, but you might learn something about doing the exam first. Let me share my screen and kick things off. No, like that.
Sorry to be late, Paul. Just to let you know, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Chilla. Great. So there we go. The test, a little, practice, a lot. Coaches, don't forget the star in front of your name. Phil is going to be sorting out the breakout groups quite soon. So if you get it in the next minute or two, that would be fantastic. Questions, if you could send them to Chula. Now he's here, hang on, but I do need to make him a co-host. So let me just do that. Chula, you should get invited to be a co-host. Good, so you ought to be able to send questions to Chula, who can then read them out or answer them as appropriate. And Phil will set up the breakout groups. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting a Fertile, a flight radio telephony operator's license as a glider pilot. And everybody who is or will be a qualified pilot will have an SPL, a sailplane pilot's license, by the end of September next year. So less than a year away now. And you can get your Fertile attached to that SPL at no extra cost. You can either put it on an existing SPL if you've got one already, or you can put it on a new SPL. Or you can have a standalone Fertile. So it's a piece of paper that is purely the radio license. If you haven't got your SPL and you're not likely to get it in the next year or so, then you might do this, but it will cost you a bit of money, 85 quid or something like that. Otherwise, this is the place to go to do it in conjunction with your SPL. To get the Fertile, you will need to take an exam. You can sit an exam providing you're older than 14 or older. You can't actually get an SPL until you're 16, though. You must have some ID to show to the examiner, so a passport or a driving license. If you don't have one of those, there are other ways of doing it. But you'll need to check with the examiner about that. And you've got to pass a communications theoretical knowledge examination and show the examiner that you've already done that, or, and this is most likely what's going to happen, sit it on the same day as the practical. So most examiners are set up to give you, it's only a 12-question paper. Most examiners are set up to give you that as well as doing the practical knowledge test. Now, in the not distant future, when we're doing hard SFCL, so after next September, Andrew Watson, who used to teach this course and also is responsible for all the SPL and bronze theoretical exams, has got us in a position where the communications paper of that set of exams will be the same as this exam. So if you've done your bronze, what will be the SPL exams, theoretical knowledge exams, we expect you to be able to use that as the theoretical paper for the FERTL, but that's not quite there yet. So you're going to have to sit a 12-question exam. All the material for that we've shown you, and if you go back through the reading package at the beginning of the course, it's all in there. There's a form that you got to fill in, which is, it says you've completed the course, but you are able to self-certify that, having done this course. It's really designed for people who are doing commercial training or PPL training with a school, but you can self-certify. You need to be able to speak English to an adequate standard. And if you can speak English as a native or equivalent to a native, you don't have to be a native Brit, but you need to be able to speak that well. You can get what's called a level 6. And a FERTL examiner can qualify, can sign you off as a level 6, but they can't sign you off as anything else. If you're not at that stage, if they assess you not to be of that standard, you're going to need to go to a CAA approved English language assessment center in order to get at least a level 4. So if you're not a native English speaker and you're not an equivalent of a native English speaker, this might happen. The other people who can sign you off for level 6, which might be an issue if you've got an old FERTL that you're trying to put on your SPL, because that might not have level 6 associated with it. The other set of people who could be quite useful to you are CAA examiners who can also, so flight examiners, and they can also sign off level 6s. And the gliding world has a number of those. FESs, they're called, flight examiner brackets S for sailplane, and they can sign you off for a level 6. So if you've already got a FERTL, you're going to put it on your SPL, you need a level 6, go find your local flight examiner. And if you want more details on this, you can look on the CAA website under English language proficiency. So the examinations. As I say, first of all, a theoretical knowledge test, 12 questions. You've got to get 9 of them right. And then a practical test. In the practical test, you can pretend to be in a glider. You can start after launch from a non-radio airfield, a gliding club. You're going to have to cover everything that's in the normal FERTL exam, but you can do the TMG stuff and the powered RT stuff, the takeoffs and the taxis and so on, in a discussion with the examiner afterwards. There's a crib available, which I'm going to show you, and you'll be given a plan of places that you're going to go, so a route that you're going to fly. And we'll come to we've got half a dozen of those in the course materials under part 6. So they're quite good examples of the sorts of routes that examiners might dream up for you to fly. Right. Although you're in a glider, the requirements that you're going to get in this route that you're given are pretty much the same as everybody else. They'll tell you probably what height you're going to be on each leg of the route. So that's not really like gliders because we go up and down, but what they're trying to avoid is they'll put a route across a piece of Class D, for example, and they're trying to avoid you saying, well, I was higher than that. They want you to make the call to do the Class D crossing or whatever. So they'll tell you that you're at, say, 3,000 feet on that leg of the route. that avoids you only doing half of what they're expecting you to do. So once that simulated flight is complete, the examiner is going to ask some scenario-based questions. Make sure you understand the sort of things that we've been talking about in Cat 413 and so on. There is a CAA aviation publication, I think CAP stands for something like that, CAP 2325, which gives guidance for fertile candidates, and that's linked off the website. Here's the crib sheet. Oh, now here's our crib sheet. So this might be useful to you for doing some of the practice routes, but this isn't the one you can take into the exam. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But this is the sort of thing that you need to get into your mind. What you will be able to take into the exam is this aid memoir, and that's in CAP 2118, which is a read that you might want to have a look at, which is the Fertile Examiner module. And in Appendix G, here we have the basic call, the full call, the position reporting call. Remember, we said that was a formal position report that you needed to make or be able to make. We wouldn't normally do it as a glider, but you need to be able to do it. And here it is: call sign, position, time, level, next position, and time of that next position. And here, usefully, is the Mayday, the urgency call, the Mayday or PAN call. This is what they're expecting you to be able to do. So a very useful bit of paper means you don't have to memorize this. You more or less just got to be able to read it. Chris Marin has volunteered to, who is an examiner, has volunteered to give us a few minutes on how the exam works. So Chris, would you like to talk?
Well, yes, Paul, you've basically mentioned it all. Only bits I can fill in what you've said. List of examiners, you may take a note of this. CAP 1585 Little Echo will give you a whole list of the UK examiners. I believe Paul has about 4 or 5 on our webinar, but your local club will probably direct you to a fertile examiner. You book the test with the examiner. As Paul said, he's mentioned the 3 parts of the test. And you can tell the examiner in advance what type is a glider, SCP, or motor glider, or balloon, whatever you feel is probably most of us is the glider. What can I say? The whole thing takes about 2 hours, including if you do the TK, the theory test. You will require your own half mil of the region the examiner is in, a ruler, a pen to write on the map. As you mentioned, a photo ID, self-certified SRG 1171. It's not a big deal. Just print one off and sign it on the back that you've had the training. What else can I say? Not many.
Chris, give a flavour for what you're looking for. I think that would be really useful.
A flavour for what I'm looking for?
Yeah.
Well,
what's the standard here, Chris?
I have to say, we can't take too many corners here. It has to be CAP 413. Now, you can make minor errors. Obviously, we all do. But if the conduct, if you're making some fairly, for example, the classic one, despite you mentioned it virtually every week, Paul, if they can't do a procedural position report, well, it's not very good. The Maydays and the PANs have to be pretty well the content perfect. These really, we don't have any latitude to let it go. At the end of the day, subject to those ones, if it's flowed fairly well, if it's too many say agains, well, the odd say again is fine, but if it keeps saying again, it's not very good. Too many ers and ums, you're transmitting and you're still not saying anything, not great. So before you, I think the advice is before you go in front of a CAA examiner, make sure your coach says you're really up for it, because often it's a wasted journey. For myself, I'm at Lasham. If people are traveling a long way, I would encourage them to phone me first, so I can basically assess probably your English language level 6, and also I would give them a fairly simple scenario to make sure you're really up to speed, because it's terrible to be a wasted day. I would say, yeah, I've been doing this with Paul for what, 5 years or so, and most people get through quite well. So that's all I can say, really, Paul.
Okay.
You've spelt all the detail. And by the way, the standalone, if anyone wants it, it's gone up to £93.
Okay.
And possibly the only other thing, the CA examiner will require a fee, and it's entirely up to him. I've been charging £90 for the last 30 years. I've now put it up to £100. So that's my personal fee, but everyone has their own.
Yeah, there are some people charge more, I think.
Yeah.
What, Chris, would you say were the typical weak spots of glider pilots doing this?
The weak spots is, probably I've just mentioned them actually. It's the procedural position report. Mayday's not done correctly. PAN's not done correctly. Readbacks not very accurate to Class Ds. Basically, I wouldn't say anything too black and white. It's usually the overall conduct, ers and rs and standby. Standby is good, by the way. Standby gets you out of jail if you get tongue-tied. But it's say against, ers, and it's not flowing very well. And often the way I do the test is just the air traffic, which is me, and the pilot. Some people do put other aircraft in it, but that's up to the examiner. But yeah, that's all I can say, really.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Paul and Chris, I'll just come in with a question which is relevant here. So it's a written question. Chris, when would you say you're expecting people to do the full position report?
Okay, this is in Class G airspace, probably with London information, not in a radar environment.
Okay.
Okay, so how would you set that scenario up, Chris?
Well, he's been given on the briefing a route, and he's on the route. There's a turning point in Class G airspace,
yeah,
and the London Information Controller, FISO, will say, report Little Sodbury, and his answer will be Wilco. He turns Little Sodbury, I expect a procedural position report. He invents the times. I'm not interested in the actual times, just invent some times, just like the whole thing isn't a navigational exercise. Invent approximate positions 2 miles southeast of Little Sodbury or whatever. It doesn't matter of precision, and times doesn't matter, but the content of a procedural position report must be correct.
Okay, thank you. Chula, what other questions do we have?
Okay. Just to reiterate that, yes, you can self-certify on the form. What was it, 11?
SRG 1171.
Okay, so that, yes, Paul said it, but yes, that is the answer, self-certify. If you get a FRTL, do you have to sit the bronze RT test, Paul?
At the moment, you will need to do the communications paper part of the bronze, but if you get a FRTL, you're going to walk it, so I wouldn't worry much about it.
Yeah.
In the future, they'll be the same.
And is there any benefit to having a standalone FRTL if later moving on to a LAPL, for instance?
No.
Okay, that's the answer.
You've got a FRTL. You can put it, once you've got the FRTL, you can put it on your LAPL, for example.
Thanks. And there's a question here. I know you've just covered it, but fair enough. What is the cap for candidate guidance? And just to remind everyone that the slides are going to be available post this session, and it is on there. But Paul, what was the cap for the guidance?
I haven't got it on my screen.
Okay, I've got it. It's CAP 2325.
Yeah, but I think I've got it in one of the next slides, so it'll be there.
Yeah, you've already shown. And can you do the communications theory test separately from the practical? Yes, you can, is the answer to that.
I think the question is, why would you want to? Because you've then
Yeah.
got 2 contacts with an examiner, which really want one.
Yeah. How's the FRTL kept current? There is, I'm happy to be corrected, but no, once you've got it for life. Okay, that's the questions.
Yeah, on the currency thing, use it, but
Yeah.
nobody's going to ask you to take it again.
Yeah.
If you did it 30 years ago and haven't used it since, you've still got a FERTL. You might not be very good at talking on the radio there.
The only thing to add to that is if you've got a level 4 or level 5 English language, they are revalidated, but it's over quite a few years. If you've got a level 6, it's for life in terms of the English language.
Okay. I did get one question. Will we receive some kind of proof of attending this formal FERTL training? We haven't needed it so far. There was a year when we had to, but because you can self-certify, you don't need proof. If it turns out for some reason you do, we'll provide it. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, guys. I had
a question that I think was missed. I don't know if that was deliberate.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, right. Beg your pardon. What was it?
Do you need to be British or in any way? Like, is there any sort of nationality restrictions so you kind of do a FERTL when you?
Okay, so I thought I replied directly to you. The answer is no, you do not. There was a time the CAA said you had to have a British passport. I couldn't believe it when they said it. I rang them up. They said that was the case to me. They didn't listen, but they have now changed their mind. You do not need to have a British passport. The question is your language standard.
Yeah, if you can persuade an examiner that you speak English to the standard of a native, I'm paraphrasing that. Chris will correct me if I've got it wildly wrong. You're good.
You are correct.
Thank you. Okay, suggestions then to build proficiency to the required standard. So what we're going to do next after tonight is I will send you all an email asking, and I'll probably ask for some feedback on the course, but the most important question there is whether you want to sign up for some further coaching, which isn't like we're doing now, particularly in order to go do the exam. So what we do is we set up some study groups. I try and do them geographically. It's not always possible, but if there are a bunch of you at any town club and there's a coach local to any town club, I'll try and set you all up as a group. And then if you want to meet face to face, you can. We ask the coaches who would like to do that, and we generally get a reasonable number of coaches. Coaches, we can cover the costs of a Zoom account for you, so you don't get hit by the 40 minutes and it having to get everybody to dial in again. So we'll cover that. I'll give you details of that when I write to you as well. So we try and set up some study groups, and then you can all work together to use the material that we've provided, and there's a half a dozen practice routes. So they are examples of the sorts of things that you would get should you do an exam. And you can make sure that you are good at dealing with those, and preferably not just reading the words, but understanding how you're doing it, and well, not preferably, importantly, understanding how you do it and why you're doing what you're doing. You can seek assistance from your coach as and when you do it, but don't forget they're volunteering to do this. They and you can set up times when you can meet as a group, and then practice. You can practice in pairs, you can use script rehearsal, you can watch the videos, you can speak out loud in the car. Practice makes perfect on this stuff. You're not going to do it once and then go past the test. You need to be fluent. Don't forget the theoretical knowledge. There's a big chunk of it there. They only ask you 12 questions, but they're reasonably eclectic, and you need to get a reasonable number of them right. Ask your coach, as Chris says, to sign you off as ready for test. I do it sooner rather than later, because this stuff has a half-life. And so put some effort into it, get good, go do the test. I thought I'd chuck one slide in. real world versus exam. It's not a long list, but let me just run through the things that I've picked up over the last few years as things that we actually in the real world we do a little bit differently from the exam. The first ones are I just do it anyway. I've mentioned this earlier on in the course. Don't say no service required. Just ask for a basic service. It's shorter and they know what you mean. In the test, you are absolutely going to use Glider, Golf, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or whatever it is as your call sign. In the real world, you'll find most people using Glider plus either their comp number or their trigraph. So I fly Glider 28, for example. And we do that because it's shorter and everybody else does it, and it works really well. The Glider bit tells everybody you're a glider, which is really useful for their situational awareness. But this thing is shorter. In the test, we've got the from and to in the full message, and it's there to give the controllers situational awareness. But of course, we're normally going in a triangle, so it doesn't give them much situational awareness. So typically what people do is tell them where the next turning point is. So they know we've told them where we are, and we're going to say where we're going next. And that keeps the length down as well. In CAT 413, for those of you who've looked, and it's in the course material, there is a phraseology for unattended airfields, where we put the call sign of the airfield on the front, and we put the name of the airfield on the back. You should absolutely use this for shared frequencies. So if you're making calls at a gliding club that shares its frequency with somebody else quite close, you should do that. But my personal view, and I think most people's view, is you don't need to do it for the airfields with their own frequency, because it takes a lot more time. It's great. It's very useful if your call can be heard at more than one airfield. We've talked about this in the last couple of weeks. In the exam, you're always going to be talking to one air traffic service unit or another. So Chris mentioned, for example, going over to London Information and them asking you to do a position report. Great. In the real world, we would rarely talk to London Information unless we wanted a particular thing. Oh, sorry, I've got this on the next thing. Sorry, in the real world, we'll often go to a gliding frequency or have the radio turned down, and that drops our workload. So listen to people when you're close to them, talk to them when you need to, but you don't need to all the time. So London Information, as I said, in the exam, you might go to London Information for basic service and do a position report or something like that. In the real world, we'll only go to London Information if we need specific information. To be honest, if everybody flying a glider called them, nothing would happen. They wouldn't have the capacity. Full Mayday call, as Chris says, you have to get that right in the exam, put all the bits of information in. Your qualifications are as SPL, but that, for example, is there really to let air traffic know if people are capable of flying in clouds, if they're flying a powered airplane. So in the real world, you'll get out what's useful and what you've got time for. And that's an Aviate, Navigate, Communicate's useful. So it's actually a pretty small list, but there are a few things that we do slightly differently. Okay, so if you want to get your FRTL, sign up for further coaching. I'll try and get that email out before Christmas. Practice, and that's your responsibility, not the coach's. The coach isn't there to make you do the work. They're there purely to give you a bit of assistance and help you if you need it. Go book a test. Under the course materials, in the references section, there is a link to the CAA's list of examiners, and it gives the email addresses and phone numbers, and you can find one, phone them up, check they are happy to do a test for you, and book that. Make sure you apply for the FRTL within 24 months of taking the exams. If you don't, you'll have to take the exam again. So I wouldn't wait too long for either of these things, either the FERTL or the SPL application. If you pass your FERTL and you're going to do the SPL in the next year, then maybe hang on to the pass form and get it on your SPL when you apply for that. But anybody who is already qualified ought to be putting their SPL application in the next month or so. Otherwise, they're in real danger of not getting it, because we need it by 2025 September, and there's going to be a big queue. I think offhand it's something like a quarter to a third of people have got one, so it's quite a large number of people to get done. Okay, test routes are on the website. The first three are perhaps a bit more appropriate for the glider style test, but the other three would be useful to have a look at. And here's a list of further reading. Here's the FERTL examiner manual. There's 1171 that Chris mentioned, and so on. And you've got this one, 2325, which is guidance for FERTL candidates. Lastly, I've got asked to chuck in a word from the Airprox board. There was an Airprox between a powered aircraft in an instrument approach and a glider, and they talked about that quite a lot. And they just wanted me to remind you that when you're flying close to an airfield, you can always ask if you think there might be, if you've heard about some traffic but you're not sure where it is. So just ask them in English, where's that traffic you've just been talking about? Quite useful. So it might improve your situational awareness if you need to. Okay. So before we go to group work, Shura, have we got any more questions?
Yeah, there's a question which says, does the FERTL taken with a gliding instructor differ from a FERTL taken by a commercial pilot? Well, you can't take a FERTL with a gliding instructor particularly. You take a FERTL with a CAA FERTL examiner, who may or may not be a gliding instructor. You can opt for a gliding bias test or a power bias test, and that's something and that will vary slightly differently. That's what Paul's been talking about and we've talked about, but that's something to talk about with the CAA FERTL examiner beforehand. I think there's one more. Is all the content we need for the theory on the slideshows? I'll say with really 99% confidence, answers yes. That and the videos, yes.
Yeah, the theory, if you look at the pre-reading package, I think we cover everything in the theoretical questions there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And what is the difference between a Part SFCL and SPL? Do you know how to respond to that, Paul?
Yes. The SPL is the sailplane pilot's license, and Part SFCL is the name of the regulation which defines the sailplane pilot's license. It stands for Sailplane Flight Crew Licensing. So that's the regulation, and the SPL is the license that you get as part of that regulation.
Thanks. And that's the end of the questions. Okay,
I have one or two. Are there practice questions for the written test? There's no. Chris, you might know. Have they changed the theoretical knowledge papers in the last 2 or 3 years?
They changed them when the new system came in, which is approximately, 2 years ago. There were a new set of papers, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything dramatically different about them?
I would say not. Something has just, you may have covered it in your last 5 sessions, safety com.
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Okay, because
sorry, I've seen the thing, so I was going to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So on the website, Pulleys did publish have published, and I've linked it on the website, a book of theoretical knowledge questions. I've done an analysis of those questions also on the website, which tells you what areas that they're in. But their set of questions was on the older set of papers, but it's the same theoretical knowledge material. So I think you'd be okay going through that, and you treat them as examples of the questions you might get, but go to the source material to learn it. Here's one I don't know the answer to. Number of exam attempts possible, Chris?
You can do it twice. If you fail it the third time, you have to fill in a special form, or the CAA do, and the CAA will now assess you.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you raised SafetyCom. What do you want to say about it? I mean, we've covered it.
How can I say this? On the theoretical knowledge paper, there is at least one, if not two, questions on SafetyCom.
Thank you. What a good hint. Write that down, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, SafetyCom is a tricky one to remember the three criteria when can you call an airfield on SafetyCom. They want it very close range in the three criteria. You must know those.
Excellent. Thank you for that. VJ says, should we treat the exam as though we're in a powered aircraft and not a glider? An examiner might not be a glider pilot. It's up to you. If you want to do it as a powered aircraft, you can. You're going to get the whole thing from startup through taxi and so on as part of your exam. We put some effort into making them do it as allowing us to do it as a glider pilot to try and remove the dissonance that was otherwise there. But you've still got to be able to talk to the examiner about that, the startup and taxi and so on. So up to you. You can ask for either. I'd do it as a glider pilot. Ron says, Cap 2325 says we get 20 minutes to plan a route from the exam brief. What's expected? Chris?
Yes, you get 5 minutes to draw the lines on a map, and then you get a full briefing, and then this 20 minutes is for you to work out who you're going to talk to, and you can make as many notes as you want. You can write what you want. For example, the contents possibly of a Mayday again, or who you're going to call, in which order. It's you working out where you are, get familiarized with the route. And for example, you'll have a list of frequencies. That airfield, is it air ground? Is it AFIS, or is it full air traffic? You'll have all the information in front of you to make the right calls. But you give them 20 minutes for that.
Thank you. Matthew says there are booklets for the RT test. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, Matthew. I mean, there's various publications that people have done that will help you for RT tests. They often, I think, probably predate the current set of papers and things. They're good things to go through. They're good examples. But we've covered the material here. Andrew says pass or fail, no marginal fails. I think so. Is that right, Chris?
Pass or fail.
Yeah, thank you. All right. And Matthew says also apps, quite a few of them. Yeah, that's true. So there's lots of material. And we link to some of it on the website. Okay, that's all I've got. Tudor, have you got anything else?
Well, there's one that's coming. I was about to type an answer. It says, when do they tell you what about the emergency calls? Do they tell you that at the time or in advance? Well, when I was an examiner, it was at a certain point in the route. I would want to say, don't worry. You can ask your examiner on the day. They'll answer that. Your job is to know the format and be able to speak a Mayday call.
Okay. Yeah, the examiners aren't trying to catch you out.
No.
So, there's a desire to have you pass. You've got to do your part of it, though.
Yeah. That's it.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we are done on that. For those who want to do the exam, you've got to do the work, and good luck. Now we're going to go to breakout groups, Phil, if we're ready.